I wouldn't let my estranged father walk me down the aisle after he suddenly reappeared. My stepdad insisted I give him a chance, so I decided to walk alone instead. I, 28F, never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, 3 days after what should have been the happiest day of my life, feeling conflicted. Let me give you some background. My biological father, let's call him Jack, left when I was 5. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. My mom was devastated, but she's a strong woman. She picked up the pieces and raised me on her own for a few years. When I was 8, she met David, my stepdad. He's been my rock ever since. David is everything a father should be. He taught me to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, and cheered the loudest at my high school graduation. He's the one who comforted me through my first heartbreak and taught me how to change a tire. For all intents and purposes, he's my dad. Fast forward to 6 months ago. I was knee-deep in wedding planning with my fiancé, Alex, 30M, when I got a Facebook message. It was from Jack. After 23 years of radio silence, he wanted to reconnect. I was floored. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I never saw it. But curiosity got the better of me. We met for coffee. It was awkward. Jack looked older, of course, but I could still see the man from my faded childhood memories. He apologized, said he had been battling addiction and didn't want to drag us down with him. He'd gotten clean, he said, and wanted to make amends. I didn't know how to feel. On one hand, I was angry. How dare he waltz back into my life after all this time? On the other, there was this small part of me, the little girl who used to wait by the window, hoping her daddy would come home, that was relieved. He hadn't forgotten about me. I told Alex and my mom about the meeting. Alex was supportive but wary. My mom? Well, she tried to hide it, but I could see the pain in her eyes. David, ever the peacemaker, encouraged me to give Jack a chance if that's what I wanted. Over the next few months, Jack and I had a few more meetings. They were always strained, filled with small talk and awkward silences. He asked about my life, my job, my hobbies. I gave him the Cliff Notes version, not ready to let him in fully. He seemed genuinely interested, but there was always this undercurrent of guilt and regret. Then, about a month before the wedding, Jack dropped the bomb. He asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I was stunned. Walk me down the aisle? The man who had been absent for most of my life wanted to take on one of the most important roles in my wedding? I told him I needed time to think about it. That night, I talked it over with Alex. He said it was my decision, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled about the idea. I couldn't blame him. He'd seen firsthand how David had been there for me all these years. The next day, I went to see David. I was nervous, unsure of how to broach the subject. But David, being David, sensed something was up. "What's on your mind, kiddo?" he asked, using the nickname he'd given me when I was 9. I took a deep breath and spilled everything. Jack's request, my confusion, my guilt. David listened patiently, his kind eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he surprised me. "I think you should consider it," he said softly. I stared at him, disbelieving. "What?" David sighed. "Look, I know Jack hurt you. He hurt all of us. But he's trying now. Maybe this is his way of making amends." But you're my dad," I stammered. "You're the one who's been there for everything. You should be the one to walk me down the aisle." David's eyes were suspiciously shiny as he took my hand. "I love you like you're my own flesh and blood. You know that. But Jack, he's your father. Biologically, at least. If there's a chance for you to heal that relationship, maybe you should take it." I left David's house more confused than ever. Over the next few days, I agonized over the decision. I made pro and con lists, I talked it over with Alex, with my mom, with my best friend. But in the end, it came down to one thing: how I felt. And how I felt was angry. Angry that Jack thought he could disappear for 2 decades and then claim this special moment. Angry that he put me in this position. And, if I'm being honest, angry at David for being so damn understanding about the whole thing. 3 days before the wedding, I finally made my decision. I called Jack and told him that I appreciated his offer, but I couldn't accept it. The line went quiet for a moment before he spoke. I understand, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know I have no right to ask this of you. I hoped. I know, I interrupted, not wanting to hear his excuses again. But Jack, you can't just come back after all these years and expect to step into this role. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to David. There was another pause. David? Your stepdad? I took a deep breath. Yes. He's been my father in every way that matters for the past 20 years. He's the one who's earned the right to walk me down the aisle. Oh, Jack said, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. I see. Well, I hope he knows how lucky he is. The call ended shortly after that, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But my relief was short-lived. When I told David about my decision, his reaction surprised me again. Instead of being happy or relieved, he looked troubled. Are you sure about this, honey? He asked. I don't want you to regret anything on your big day. I was bewildered. Of course I'm sure. You're my dad, David. You're the one who should walk me down the aisle. David ran a hand through his graying hair, a gesture I recognized from countless moments of deep thought over the years. I'm honored, truly. But I can't help thinking about Jack. He's trying, isn't he? Maybe this could be a new beginning for both of you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why are you pushing this? Don't you want to walk me down the aisle? Of course I do, David said quickly. It would be one of the greatest honors of my life. But I also want what's best for you. And if there's a chance for you to heal your relationship with your biological father, I don't want to stand in the way of that. I left David's house feeling even more confused and frustrated than before. Why was he being so noble about this? Didn't he understand that he was the one I wanted by my side? The next day, things got even more complicated. My mom called, her voice tight with barely contained anger. Did you know your father is in town? She asked without preamble. Jack? I asked, though I knew that's who she meant. It was still strange to hear her refer to him as my father. Yes, Jack, she spat out the name like it left a bad taste in her mouth. He showed up at my door this morning, asking about the wedding. Said he wanted to be there for his little girl. Can you believe the nerve? My heart sank. Mom, I'm so sorry. I told him he couldn't walk me down the aisle, but I didn't think he'd go to you. Well, he did, she said, her voice softening slightly. Honey, I know this is a difficult situation, but please don't let him guilt you into anything. He doesn't deserve to be part of your special day. After I got off the phone with my mom, I felt like screaming. How had this become such a mess? This was supposed to be about Alex and me, about our love and our future together. Instead, it had turned into this family drama that threatened to overshadow everything. I called my best friend, Lena, in tears. She listened patiently as I poured out the whole story. Oh, honey, she said when I'd finished. What a nightmare. What does Alex think about all this? I realized with a start that in all the chaos, I hadn't really talked to Alex about how I was feeling. He's been supportive, I said slowly. But I think he's trying not to influence my decision too much. Well, maybe it's time you two had a real talk about this, Lena suggested. After all, it's his wedding too. She was right, of course. That night, Alex and I sat down for a long, honest conversation. I told him everything, my anger at Jack, my frustration with David's selflessness, my mom's reaction, all of it. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. When I finished, he took my hands in his. Babe, he said softly, I think you're losing sight of what's important here. This day is about us, about our love and our commitment to each other. All this family drama. It's not what matters. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. But what am I supposed to do? Everyone seems to have an opinion on what I should do, but nobody's asking what I want. Alex squeezed my hands. So what do you want? Forget about what everyone else thinks for a moment. What would make you happy on our wedding day? I closed my eyes, trying to picture my perfect wedding day. And suddenly, it hit me. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. The next morning, I called both Jack and David and asked them to meet me for coffee. They both looked surprised to see each other when they arrived at the cafe. I've made my decision, I said once we were all seated. Neither of you is going to walk me down the aisle. Finally, the big day arrived. I woke up early, my stomach a knot of excitement and nerves. As my bridesmaids bustled around me, helping with hair and makeup, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. Lena, ever observant, noticed my pensive mood. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked as she helped me into my dress. I smiled at her in the mirror. Just thinking about how much has changed in the last few months. I never expected my wedding day to be quite so complicated. She squeezed my shoulders reassuringly. "But you handled it like a boss. And now you get to marry the love of your life. Focus on that." She was right, of course. As I stood at the back of the church in my white dress, I took a deep breath and looked out at the gathered guests. My unconventional family was all there, a visual representation of my complicated history. My mom sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Next to her was David, looking dapper in his suit. He caught my eye and gave me a wink and a thumbs up. The gesture was so quintessentially David that I felt a lump form in my throat. And there, in one of the back rows, sat Jack. He looked uncomfortable but determined to be there. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me a small, tentative smile. I nodded in acknowledgement, surprised to find that his presence didn't upset me as much as I'd feared it might. For a moment, I felt a twinge of doubt. Was I making the right choice, walking alone? Wouldn't it be easier to have David by my side, his steady presence calming my nerves? But then the music started, and as I took my first step down the aisle, I felt a surge of confidence. This was right. This was me, walking towards my future, strong and independent. Each step felt like a declaration: I am my own person. I am loved. I am ready for this next chapter. As I approached the altar, I saw Alex waiting for me, his face glowing with love and awe. The look in his eyes banished any lingering doubts. This was exactly where I was meant to be, exactly how I was meant to arrive here. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with personal touches that Alex and I had carefully chosen. We had written our own vows, and as we exchanged them, I was aware of the tears streaming down my face, happy ones, I promise. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was a joyous blur of dancing, laughter, and heartfelt conversations. During dinner, David stood up to give his speech. I held my breath, not sure what to expect. "When I first met this incredible young woman," David began, his voice thick with emotion, "she was a precocious 8-year-old who informed me very seriously that she already had a dad, thank you very much, and didn't need another one." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. I felt my cheeks heat up, remembering my childhood bravado. "But over the years," David continued, "I had the privilege of watching her grow into the strong, compassionate, and fiercely independent woman you see before you today. I may not be her biological father, but I couldn't be prouder if she were my own flesh and blood." He raised his glass. "To the bride and groom. May your love for each other only grow stronger with each passing day, and may you always face life's challenges together, with the same grace and determination that has brought you to this day." There wasn't a dry eye in the house after that speech. As David sat down, I rushed over to hug him, whispering a heartfelt thank you in his ear. Later, as Alex and I swayed on the dance floor for our first dance, he leaned in and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. You handled this whole situation with such grace and strength." I smiled up at him, feeling truly happy for the first time in weeks. "I had a lot of help," I said. "From you, from David, from everyone who loves me. I'm just glad we can start our marriage on our own terms." Speaking of which, Alex said, nodding towards something over my shoulder. I turned to see Jack hovering awkwardly at the edge of the dance floor. "Do you want me to run interference?" Alex asked, his tone making it clear he'd be happy to play bouncer if needed. I considered for a moment, then shook my head. "No, it's okay. I should probably talk to him." Alex kissed my forehead. "Okay. I'll be right here if you need me." I made my way over to Jack, smoothing down my dress nervously. Up close, I could see the emotions warring on his face: pride, regret, happiness, and a deep, abiding sadness. "You look beautiful," he said softly. I know I have no right to say this, but I'm so proud of the woman you've become." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thank you," I managed. I'm glad you could be here. Jack nodded, blinking rapidly. Listen, I know I can never make up for all the years I missed. But I want you to know that I'm committed to being in your life now, in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Even if that's just as a distant acquaintance. I studied his face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I appreciate that, I said slowly. I can't promise anything, but I think I'd like to try having some kind of relationship. Maybe we could get coffee sometime next month? The hope that bloomed on Jack's face was almost painful to see. I'd like that very much, he said. As I made my way back to Alex, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The rest of the night passed in a whirlwind of dancing, cake cutting, and tearful goodbyes as Alex and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon. As we were about to get into our car, I saw David and Jack standing near each other, both watching me with matching expressions of fatherly pride. On impulse, I ran over and hugged them both. Thank you, I said, my voice muffled against David's shoulder. Both of you. For being here, for supporting me, for everything. David hugged me back tightly, while Jack patted my shoulder awkwardly but affectionately. As I pulled away, I saw them exchange a look of understanding. In that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was room in my life for both of them. As Alex and I drove away, waving to our cheering friends and family, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My path to this day might have been unconventional, filled with unexpected twists and turns, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. Because in the end, my wedding day wasn't about who walked me down the aisle. It was about celebrating love, not just between me and Alex, but the love of our entire quirky, complicated, beautiful family. It was about forgiveness, second chances, and the courage to forge your own path. And as I looked at Alex, his hand warm in mine and his eyes full of love and promise, I knew that no matter what challenges life throws our way, we'll face them together. Because that's what family does. And now, with Alex by my side, my family was more complete than ever.